So after a lot of requests today, we're going to be having a look back at all the stages of the build, of how we've got Boris to where he is today, the camper van back inside, the interior of the cabin, the mechanical engine and off-roading upgrades, and also the exterior and everything I've done on the outside, including wheels, roof rack and all the bits and pieces like that. So it's going to be a long one. When I got it, it was a farmer spec utility, very rough and ready to go, ready for carrying sheep around the farms, which is exactly what they're meant for, and it's absolutely brilliant. I wanted to transform it into a off-roading adventure, absolutely mud plugging, ready to go camper van, but wanted to look extreme on the outside. But then I changed my taste to sort of be half and half. I wanted to keep the classic look of a Land Rover and a sort of vintage look, because it is 1997 now, getting quite old, but also with the adventure ready look with the roof rack, the wheels, the tyres and a few upgrades here and there. So it's always the balance for me of making it look the way I want it to be, tasteful without it going too extreme. So for this video I made a list of all the different bits and pieces I've done. It's almost a never-ending list that keeps growing and gets shorter by the day, but it's all part of the fun working on it. So my plan was always to make the back of my 110 I was going to buy into a camper van sort of style interior. It's not extreme luxury, but it's like a sort of easy camping setup, and it's the one I always wanted. And I had this vision from the outset, and I'm pretty happy with how it's come out. A few changes along the way, but it's all a work in progress. And before you start doing the sort of customization and camper van style bits, you have to make sure that the inside is ready to be lined and insulated, and then start having carpet and stuff like that. Along the tubs at the sides, there were big 50p sized holes, I guess for where the bench seats were fitted. They were huge, and there were small little holes all the way along everywhere, and the water would spray up from the wheels, and the brown mud at the side of the walls would hit the roof and was absolutely covering the inside of the interior. Filling those holes, I used chemical metal, which I've used a lot before. I make the joke that I use it too much, but I think there's a reason for that, and I've recommended it to a few people, and everyone really thinks it's a good product. So what I did was tape a cereal box to the underneath of the holes, and then use the chemical metal on top and flatten it out, and that sets like aluminium effectively, blocked all the holes, including the small ones. And these are very thin bits of filler, about this wide, 50p wide and about 5mm thick, and it's held up this whole time. A year and a half later, lots of abuse, stuff all over it, no water comes in through those whatsoever, and I'm really happy with that. So underneath here I've got two storage boxes. One's accessed through the slot in the lino here, which I cut, and that goes under a bed that's usually here. It's very easy to get at, but less easy than the drawer of the storage system, which is at that end, and that is a Mobile Storage Systems metal Defender drawer. It's really good because it runs on very smooth runners, and that's where I've got all my cooking equipment. So the sideboards are very thin ply with carpet on it that I got off eBay. Mega Fan Mats is the make, using spray adhesive to stick it on. Just measured up the area that it needs to fit in and cut it to shape. Could cut them both at the same time because they are very much equal. And then just found some holes where you can drill through and use plastic trim clips to hold it back. On the back of the ply I've got very thin sort of neoprene soundproofing foam. I've got this 3-switch configuration which controls the spotlights and the string lights, and the string lights are really good for at night if you are wild camping, got the curtains shut and you want to not have too much light showing out. That's great for reading and stuff like that. These string lights are very cheap. Unfortunately I got it wrong a couple of times where I ordered the wrong ones and they weren't DC, and I tried to wire them up for DC and it just didn't work. These just arrive, you cut the connector off and wire it into your 12-volt system with a small fuse and a switch. Very easy, and does just transform the interior. These headlinings, all three of them are from scrapyards on eBay. I got them secondhand. These two are from Cornwall, and that one I'm up north. They are all lined in the same carpet as the sides. I cleaned them up. These two I epoxied with resin so that it had a lot more rigidity because they were very flimsy before, and it just gives it a little bit more of a sturdy feel when you've bolted them up. The front one, I didn't do that too. I just cleaned the old lining off it, very horrible foam underneath from a scrapyard, and then just used spray adhesive to glue it all on, and that is a big helper, all of this with soundproofing for when you're driving along. Above all of the headlining pieces and the two walls, I was recommended this very clever foil and insulation sandwich loft insulation, and it's rated A in its insulation properties. I was recommended it by a campervan builder locally, and it's a huge upgrade. You just need to cut it out to shape, and then you tape up the edges to stop any moisture getting in there with gaffer tape, and then you lie it behind. And even though it was a bit of a job doing that, it makes a big difference and stops the condensation and a lot of the cold chilly nights, which is good. So the bottom here is now wood, as you can see. It's lino, and I just did it the other day. I had carpet different from the side on the bottom, a very thick sort of household black carpet, which was great, insulating, sound insulating, and very nice to sit on when you're just hanging about in the back. Unfortunately, as it's such a thick carpet, it can pick up a lot of dirt you put in, and if you also want to put logs, wood, bikes, oil, whatever you want to do, it's not great because you want to sit on it as well. So it starts to pick up the dog smell. So I thought of doing a teak decking in here, like a boat. Proved to be too expensive and difficult, and also be hard to get it in and out, and you need to get into the storage box. So I thought this sort of lino from eBay was very easy to cut out, and it gives it sort of an oak floorboard sort of look that matches this chopping board and the cupboard here. The rear door was just bare metal before. Used a cardboard template to cut it out to size first, and then recut it out in the plywood, and then wrap the carpet on it and insulated it the same way as behind. On that, I've got a cooking table, which is inspired by the front runner ones you see out there, but this one was quite cheap to make. I designed it myself and cut it out of plywood, just using the black paint and the sail rigging wire to hold it while it's extended out. It's lasted the whole time. I just painted it up again the other day just to make sure that no water gets into it and starts rotting or anything like that, but just using the lock, and works perfectly for me. What I would like to do on it next is try and put a bit of a rubber lining on the table, as if you're on a slight slope, things start to slip on the paint a little bit. It's a bit of a rush making this. It's just a wooden frame, 2x2 lengths all the way, glued and screwed together, and then with a ply lining. We were just about to go to France, and I made that the day before, as well as doing the mattresses. It's just a stained ply top, which is actually warped now, unfortunately, with a hinge, and then the carpet lined as well. It's just brilliant, and it doesn't slide around at all, which is really good, and it's also a place to put things when you're camping. So here, usually, I've got two mattresses stacked up that come half the way along. Then the top one comes off, goes there, and then you've got a small size double bed, and it's a memory foam mattress off eBay, very cheap I think. Just took the cover off, cut it down to shape, and then mounted it to plyboard and wrapped the fabric round, stapled it to it. That was perfect for a long time, but ever since I put the insulation in, the walls came in a little bit and started to squash the plywood, so the bed was really difficult to move, unfortunately, and was very heavy as well. So what I've done, I've sent it off to be reupholstered like a normal mattress cover, which you can unzip and wash, and that means it'll be lots lighter. You can have it up as a sofa, and also you can move it around and lay it much easier and get into this box much more easily as well. So I'm looking forward to getting that back, but extremely comfortable, 6-inch thick memory foam mattress, just one you can get for the household. Only needed to be cut up a little bit, cut in half, and it's so comfortable, probably more comfortable than my bed. And to be able to say that when you go camping is a luxury, and I really like it. For a long time I had a roll down sort of waterproof deck chair style canvas, a bit like the seat covers. That rolled down from here, that was just bulldog clipped to use as curtains. It was always my intention as well to go to a sort of sliding curtain, and these are the ones I went for. They actually made for, I think, T5 camper vans. They aren't actually cut. These are very standard size. I measured it up, and thankfully they're almost perfect in length and width, and they work perfectly. They have a slightly cheaper option, which is just black, one single layer, and these are their blackout option, and it really does keep the light out in the morning. And also if you're wild camping, if you're into that and you might be in a slightly difficult spot and you don't want anyone to see you, then this stops the light from bleeding out as well, so that you don't get seen and you can just look like you're parked up and there's no one in there, which is really nice. Right up the back of the interior there is a big bamboo IKEA chopping board that is hinged to the inside storage box. That's a great inside cooking solution for when it's raining outside. You just open the vents at the front and the door a little bit at the back to let some ventilation through. And that's great for putting the stove on to make a cup of tea or some food. You wouldn't be frying in here obviously, but for quick stuff that's great. You can move the mattress down to there and have it out as a laptop stand for if you're doing any work or anything you want, really, just to chuck it on there, and it's an extra table and works perfectly. So I just put my axe up. I forgot to have it up there. It's in 2 quick fist mounts on the side here, and I like to mount it inside so it doesn't get weathered too much. These quick fists are really great, in and out very easily, adjustable to size, and holds it really sturdily when you're driving around. Both sides here you can see, and there's one at the back. These are actual old army surplus grenade and ammo holders. I thought they look quite cool in the back here. At the moment I've got a small towel in there, penknife there, so that side, and then sometimes have a few other bits and pieces in those. They're really cool. You just screw those on, and I think it's a good addition to it, and it's great to put things in. I've got these 2 elastic storage nets. They're really good, those. They're good for storing bits and pieces, and I wish there was a bit of space in the front for those, because then you could put your phone and map, whatever you need in there, and I might see if I could try and do that in the front. So here's the inside of the mobile storage system's rear drawer. I keep all the cooking utensils in here, and you've got the stove here. I did have a different style one, more of the briefcase style, but I've opted for this more camping style gas, and a very small hob there. Effectively these 2 bits connect up to make a sort of jet boil style system, and it boils water within minutes, or a whole litre. A 5 litre water bottle there, put that on the hob, it shuts up, you can cook anything in there really, anything you want works, just all the different things, and it's a great item to have in the back at all times. Also goes on fires, toasties, sausages, meat, whatever, you name it, it's all in there, it all works. Washing up bowl, 2 metal plates under it, 2 metal bowls, cup there, also the tyre deflators in there as well. The Trangia as a second hob. That uses Meth's Swedish made stove with 2 saucepans. I've got 2 frying pans and a kettle. That's great, all just there, and that means you can cook 2 things at once. Spare gas, bit of coffee, small first aid kit, tea of course. Give it up, gonna be alright. So one of the first things I did was painting the roof. I didn't do it myself. Got it professionally done in Arles Blue. I didn't actually know the paint code back then, but it is Arles, and I do know that now. Also called Windjammer. Matches the colour, and I just much prefer the look. It gives it the more adventure look over the farm spec utility, which is always good. Next up, the headlights on the front. The truck came with those, super bright. Unfortunately, even on dip beam, you do get flashed. I'm thinking about moving into standard lights with LED bulbs. I like the classic look, but they are very good. Light surrounds, very standard, but I like these vented ones here. They didn't come with those, and just replaced those, really cheap, nice and easy. These are YPAC LED upgraded indicators and side lights. I put these on myself. All the wiring was really awful, so I just spliced them in with a soldering iron and heat shrink. Unfortunately didn't put connectors in, which I didn't think about at the time, but now that means I can't take these off that easily to paint them. I like the orange and the clear. I didn't want to go for the all clear or smoked, because again, sticking with sort of the original sort of look, that's what I wanted to do, but they work perfectly. Here you'll see there is no lettering anymore, as it should be, and there isn't anything here. I went for this grille, which I really like, but what I wanted to do is just make it look a bit more classic up the front here. So I had Defender written along here about a year, and I think it looks really good, but now I look back at these old style bonnets and I think it looks much better empty, which really suits the front here. And this grille from Germany, which I really like. I'll put a link in the description below, and this is one I've wanted for about a year again. Press plate here, these are just from eBay. and it's still got the reflective coating, so it is absolutely legal, and this age of vehicle can have press plates. So next up down here, you've got the ORE steering guard. I've had this on for a few months now and it's absolutely brilliant. You know, I've chucked it against ruts and rocks and stuff like that and it bounces off and you wouldn't even know. Just give it a wash and it's back to normal again. My old one was just a standard metal looking plated one, and you couldn't actually get underneath it because it didn't have any bolts in the front, so you had to take the whole thing off to try and get to the steering arms, and it was just really cumbersome and very sort of silver. This one's black, comes right up to the bumper and just is a whole lot better. It also has these towing points in the front, recovery points, and you've got the shackle on there, and all in all just a great design and brilliant bits of kit, so I'm really happy with that. So when I got it, these vents were in a really bad state. They were very rusty, letting water in, and so was the bulkhead on that side. You couldn't really see it until it started to bubble up, but it was pretty bad, unfortunately. So with a knot wheel on an angle grinder, really aggressively took all that rust off and then treated it with rust prevention and filled it. The seals are also genuine Land Rover ones. I did buy Britpart ones that filled the whole thing and unfortunately just were far too rigid, didn't work at all. So I went back to the originals, brand new, and they work a lot better. So I definitely recommend those. With the filling and the paint back on, just brush painted on here, it looks a hell of a lot better and it works a lot better as well, keeping the air and the water out when you want it to. Next up, a job I didn't do, but the windscreen seal was slipping around, letting water through and squeaking a lot. So it had a new seal put on it and sealed with silicone as well to hold it in place and seal it from the water, as well as these new windscreen mounts as well. These are aftermarket ones in black, which I like the look of, and all in all has stopped the water and the squeaking and works a hell of a lot better. Snorkel, it's a really good one. It's a safari snorkel off Facebook Marketplace. I was really lucky to find it on there, and ever since then I've been friends with the guy I bought it with, Josh, who's got this Cummins. Such a beast of a truck. This was on it before, and unfortunately it was choking the engine with lack of airflow. For the 300 TDI it's alright, big fan of that, and especially because it had this custom bracket on the inside to seal it before it goes on rather than sealing against the fender. So this way it works, it has a metal plate with a welded on tube coming out, and that's sealed, and that attaches to the existing piping for the airbox, so you know it's sealed and you don't have to rely on the snorkel pressing against the wing to seal. Next up, you can see these cable ties here holding on the breather kit. That's for both diffs, for the transfer box and the gearbox. I'm hoping to get a breather for the crankcase as well. That at the moment has a wading plug, but no breather. And I've got the slot for it ready to go, but it's blocked up at the moment. But just keeping those diffs clear of water is a great and necessary thing for off-roading. Boris came with checker plate. It was looking a bit raggedy, but I like where it is. I think checker plate's a bit, it depends what you like. The checker plate came with Boris. I think if it didn't have any, I would have just bought some for these wings here. Great for standing on, looks nice, but I think if you have too much, it can make it look a little bit over the top. And also on steel parts, like the cross member, it hides rust, so minimal but effective. So 5 sets of wheels in total. I've always been known as a bit of a wheel and tyre changer on all my cars. This one is no different. It came with the standard Land Rover white steel wheels, which were very rusty, and looked again like the farmer spec utility, which is what it was, and you know, that's great. From there, I really wanted to go down the look of the alloy boost look, which I liked at the time and changed my mind with, but I couldn't get boosts, so I found some old style boosts, which are off the earlier Discoveries and Defenders, and they had BF Goodrich all-terrains on, quite worn, but you know, worked well and had a good offset, so when you had your full lock on and off, it didn't rub at all, so they were really nice. On our way back from France on a trip, I was looking on Facebook Marketplace, and on the journey home in the UK, I found some original good new style boosts, and I liked those a lot. That's the look I was looking for, so I swapped the tyres onto those, put them on, and unfortunately the offset was smaller, so when you're on lock, a lot of rubbing, and you really couldn't steer that well, unfortunately. So I bought some Terra Firma 30mm spacers to put those in, gave a good stance, looked really nice, and for a long time I used those, but then I saw, and I really liked the Challenger / Mach 5 copy wheels, and I bought those from 4x4tyres.co.uk, and I wrapped those in Cooper Discoverer STT Pro Maxes, and they are beastly wheels and tyres with a -35 offset, giving it a huge stance, great off-road, almost like cheating off-road in the mud, and looked crazy. It looked like a beast off-roader, but I think for me, I changed my mind halfway through, and I liked the sort of more classic adventure look than a challenge truck type thing. So I wanted to go back to a more white, upgraded look, and I went back to 4x4tyres.co.uk and sold the black Challengers and put these white steel wheels, sort of upgraded with the holes. I really like the look of them. I was contemplating Wolves, but these are lighter. Roof rack, adventure style roof rack off eBay. I really like the look of it. You know, it's the caged look and also holds things in if you don't want to strap them down, and you can stand up there, and it's just generally all around really good. I've recommended it to a lot of people, but always say that unfortunately on this one, the paint peels off so easily. You actually touch anything to it, put anything on it, and it peels off, and then you get rust, unfortunately. And you've got the 5 light mounts on the front for spotlights as well. Can't remember the make, but it was from eBay, and I'll try and put a link in the description below. And yeah, I like it a lot. So up on the roof rack, we've got the Pelly case with jump cables and recovery ropes, a jerry can for 20 litres of diesel. It's a Wavian one and doesn't leak at all, thankfully. Otherwise we get a bit smelly and maybe explode. Up there we've also got a shovel up there. It was too long, so I cut the end down and painted it, and also used quick fists to mount it to the top with wooden spacers to allow it to fit up there. And I'm going to lock it up there because I don't want anyone to steal it really. Also the CB aerial mount up there, mounted straight to the rack, and that's great. Along the side I've got an Adventure Kings awning. That's really great. It was £60, but I was over in Australia and you can only get them over there. I shipped it back here because of the price, and I know that you can't really get them here, and not many people have them on Defenders, so I thought that would suit it really nicely. Works perfectly, and can't wait to use it for camping in the summer. It's not up there now, but I've got an electric steel chainsaw in a waterproof bag that I can bungee cord up there for when we go laning, and if you have come across any branches or trees across the road, or if you need firewood for a camp, that's up there ready to go. No noise, really discreet, and lasts a long time. That's a great bit of kit to have with you. Along the top of the tub there were black clips all the way along, and they were there for a while and I didn't really think about them, but then I started to wonder why they were there, because this is a hard top. So it got me thinking. I looked back on the MOT history, and it was once a green pickup, so that's what they were for. They look quite cool along the side, but absolutely unnecessary. Took them all off, filled the holes with chemical metal, and painted over it again, and I think it gives it a cleaner look, and also you don't need them there anyway, so I'm happy with that. So while I was doing that restoration, I borrowed a barn, which was really handy to do it in the winter. I was going to take the doors off and replace the hinges, and give them a bit of a clean up in the inside. When I got them off and took them onto the ground and had a proper look at them, I realised that the bottoms of them were really shot. And the locks were gone, you couldn't get out, they would swing open sometimes, the hinges would rattle around so much. It generally just needed a big overhaul, and I learned the hard way when I took it to a fab shop to try and weld them up and give them a clean up that they weren't worth saving, unfortunately. So thankfully at Jack Fielder, Land Rover's around the corner from me, he had 2 old Navy Defender doors with cards and handles and everything you needed just to get them working again, and they were in good condition. They were very rusty, so I had to grind them down and paint them. They were white and originally grey, so I had to sand it down, grind the rust off, fill any rusted holes. They were still quite expensive for what they were, and had to do quite a lot of work on them, but used 2K spray paint on the outside locally, got the Isles blue, sanded them down, took them inside and sprayed them up myself, and hand painted the inside, and I think they came out really well. Really happy with that. And the Brit part hinges didn't really hold up very well, but they're looking really good, and they think they match the car pretty well, as you can see. Pretty happy with the outcome of those, and you can actually get in and out of the car now, and they swing really nicely. I had some really bad aftermarket door seals in blue bags, and they didn't work at all. They were very rigid and didn't seal, water coming in all the time. And we decided to get Land Rover genuine ones, which are £70 each. Sounds a bit ridiculous for a piece of rubber, but I would say it's 100% worth it. If you've got a vehicle like this, it's a good investment to do, because the water comes in enough and that stops it from doing it and makes the doors shut really nicely, so I definitely recommend doing that. Aftermarket mirrors, they were very crusty before, so just bit the bullet and bought new ones. The ball joints had snapped off on a lane and I couldn't adjust them anymore, so just got new ones of those. They are mounted on some new genuine Land Rover hinges. So I went from the original blue ones, which were very janky and horrible and rusty and shook around and didn't let the doors line up properly. Went to some Brit part ones that I painted. Unfortunately, they had a coating on which I couldn't get off properly. The paint started to come off after a few months and the rust started to show, and I could barely move them with my hands. They're so solid when I took them off that I could hardly move them, and that meant the doors were very seized as well. Thankfully, I saw LRD90 on Instagram just got some optimal aluminium hinges. So I bought his old genuine hinges from 2014, actually off a twisted 90. So these are technically twisted hinges, which is really good. And they are so much better. You know, they're only 6 years old compared to the old ones which I had, which were 22 years old. They made a hell of a lot of difference to opening it and swinging. And you can actually hardly get them to stay anymore. They're so loose and they work loads better. And I like the look of the grey actually on the blue. On the side, it used to have the farmer spec old school flap down steps on the side. They were really, really loose and made loads of sound. Obviously, it's really handy for getting in and out. You just step on it, go up. Now you have to work your way up there a little bit more. Passengers don't like it very much, but I like the look of it, the clean look underneath, and it's better for off-roading and clearance. So under the snorkel and on the wing that side, added little Union Jacks. I really like the look of that. I think it's more of a ex-army Defender sign, but I just like the British car, British made, and I think it goes with the blue really well, and just finished it off the side here. Don't like too many stickers, but I think that just looks really good. Finished it off nicely. So as you come to the back here, first thing you see, this massive full-size spare. This is a spare that matches exactly the size of the wheels I've got on. For a long time I had the small steel original wheel on the back mounted to the door, rattling around. But this one now, I've got a second-hand wheel and tyre I bought on Facebook Marketplace, painted it up nicely. This is a Goodyear Wrangler, really good condition, and that's ready to go. Just after I put this on, I had a screw go into one of the main wheels, so I jacked it up, chucked this on and drove around for a few days, and I didn't have to worry about going off-road, doing anything on this, because I had a full size. Fixed the old one up, swapped them back over. Thankfully, that's really nice to have on the back. That's mounted to the brilliant ORE spare wheel carrier. That's mounted through the cross member underneath. I've got a full video on how to install one of those and how good they are. I've had it for a few months now. It's a brilliant bit of kit. It's really well designed, really well built. The powder coating on it doesn't scratch one bit. Compare it to the roof rack that peels off when you sneeze, and this, if you blow it up with a tank, it won't come off. All the weight's transferred through the rear cross member, so you don't have to worry about body work, which is aluminium, and it won't crack at all. I saw one recently, a genuine one, crack, and it got upgraded to one of these, so I'm really happy I've got one of these on. It uses a very unique system to press it against the door to stop it from rattling, and you really notice that when you're driving. Absolutely silent, which is brilliant. You can also stand on it, which you've seen me do before. Like this. I thought I might as well do the infamous test. I've seen it done before and it actually stands up to it. Just generally great bits of kit from ORE. Really, really happy to have those on the track, and it matches up with my steering guide as well. I really didn't want to put that on a rusty cross member, so I stripped that down, treated it with rust prevention, primed it, and then used 2K black paint to do the cross member. I'm really happy with the way it looks. It looks much better. The ladder, really nice, neat one. I got it before I actually got the roof rack, which just looked a bit weird because you don't need to get up on the roof if you haven't got a roof rack, but glad I got that. eBay special, 30 quid second hand, Brit part I think. Unfortunately covers the number plate up a bit, but I much prefer the look of it than the one that has the square hole for the number plate. That's made of aluminium, so it's really light and doesn't rust. I had to replace the number plate lights because it was very rusty and actually shorting out the car. It had rivets onto the bodywork, and it was making all my lights go haywire. And thankfully someone told me when I was in the shop one time that, have you checked the ground on that, because that can really mess up with everything. And I couldn't believe it, so what I did, buy a new one, mount it with plastic rivets, like plastic body trim clips, and glued it on, and that solved loads of the problems and looks better and works loads better as well, which is brilliant. Y-Pack LED upgrades. Unfortunately I did reverse into a pole and broke that one, so I had to get a new one. Nowhere near as good, unfortunately. Already got condensation in. Aftermarket LED fog and reverse light, just glued those on, didn't bolt them through. They look really nice and low profile LEDs again, and sealed, so there's no water in those. Around this side you've got the black aftermarket Land Rover badge and black Defender writing. Rear floodlight, these are cheap eBay ones. Bought it a few months ago, already cracked, already got water in it. Works well, but rusting, and I'm upgrading to some LTPRTZ lights from ORE, specific to ORE, and I'm really excited to get those on because these are a little bit not mounted very well, and I'll have 2 strips along the side here, and they'll be IP67 rated for water resistance and brighter and more low profile, looking a lot better. So I'm excited to get those. Up here, you see these 2 brackets, they are for the high lift jack. I took it off because it gets a bit rusty up there if you leave it, and I'm going to put it on when I go on slightly longer trips, off-roading and such like. So there's the exterior done. You can see what I've worked on over the last year, how my taste has changed and the things I've upgraded with. A lot of it sort of visual stuff, but then some of it is definitely sturdy upgrades as well for off-roading. I'm really happy with the way it's coming along. I'll get to future upgrades later on, and really happy with where I am so far. So here you go, here's the interior, the driving area, and where you spend most of the time if you're in a Defender. It looks a little bit different from when I got it. I've done a few upgrades along the way and a few changes and a few maintenance bits and pieces as well. One of the first things I did was take the dash off and insulate it with a silent coat insulating layer, which definitely reduces some of the noise from the engine through the dash area. Unfortunately, when I was there, I found a hole in the bulkhead, which I wasn't that concerned or worried about, and I filled it for the time being and got cracking with some paint, and then silent coated it as well, put the dash back on, and that was that for the meanwhile. One thing in the Defender is noise, and following on from the insulation, what I did was I put carpet on the seat box here, and I tried to wrap the tunnel and some of the footwell in a sort of very thick low density foam adhesive back stuff, and that's definitely helped. I also put some on the bulkhead on the engine side and around the fuse box as well. That's definitely helped with some of the tinniness, and with the vents being replaced and refurbished, that helped with a lot of the sound as well. What I've noticed with having carpet on the box here is that it looks good for the first few days, weeks, and it being a sort of rugged utility car and mud and off-roading, it gets very dirty very quickly, and I found that out when we replaced the clutch, because we had to take the tunnel out and work in here, and it got very dirty really quickly, and it's really hard to get a Hoover in to clean it. So what I want to do is upgrade to a Exmoor trim rubber matting system for the box here and the whole footwell and tunnel as well. They make an R380 one. That makes a big difference to the sound and the general feel inside the cockpit. In preparation of that, I have stripped down the metal, cleaned it out, and painted it again with the Arles blue and made the whole footwell look a bit better. So underneath there, I know there's not going to be any rust, as well as the other side. I'm going to do that soon and hoping to get that in shortly. This steering wheel is an eBay special with a Boss off eBay as well. I think it's an Astrali 15-inch dished retro sports car style wooden chrome looking one. It's worked really well. I've really liked it a lot. Unfortunately, the lacquer is coming off on the inside after a year, and the chrome, even though I tried to polish it back up, has just come off completely. It works still. It's starting to get a little bit sticky as well. I think it's sort of a Chinese copy. I'm really looking forward to moving into an Exmoor trim one. I know they have a much higher quality, and we'll go for something similar. I think I'm going to go for a black steering wheel with a wooden rim, and that will look really nice. Cubby box here is a black leather Brit Part 1. Works perfectly. Used to have a middle seat here, which is really raggedy, and this just adds lots more space for putting things into, and also gives you 2 cup holders as well, which is really handy. I've lined the top with a waterproof canvas to match the seat covers. These are £40 waterproof canvas seat covers just straight off eBay. Recommended those to a few people and would still recommend them. They are very good. Underneath, the seats are absolutely atrocious. So the doors are new, and I had to refurbish those and paint them, but they came with these nice neat door cards. My old ones had speaker holes cut in them, and the locks wouldn't work and bits snapped. So these are looking really nice and clean. They all work perfectly. All the handles are original and look really good. Yeah, I've got the standard gear sticks. They are just the genuine Land Rover ones. They've got the Brit Part brushed aluminium knobs on. Had some quite nice custom made brass knobs with hex pattern rods going down. They worked for a while, got rusty quite quickly, and the brass tarnished, and I sort of like the more modified original look. And unfortunately the gear stick also snapped when we were trying to replace the clutch, and the transfer box lever was too long when I got it, so when you're trying to go into second or third or reverse gears in low range, the second lever was too long, so you couldn't get the gear stick down there to actually operate it, and that was a bit of a job trying to replace all that, but now it's looking really nice and smart. Recently I got a professional welder to cut a big panel out of the bulkhead and rust proof the inside as a final hurrah of this bulkhead before I get a new one, and he managed to weld a big patch in there and give it a really good clean up on both sides, and I could see the inside of the bulkhead looking pretty rusty, so it's not much longer left for that bulkhead unfortunately, but now it's all sealed, there's no water inside, all the seals are done as well, and I'm hoping that'll be a lot less water on my feet in the future. So looking up the front here, I've got a mud dash that actually came with Boris when I got it, and I think it's a great investment. I think I would be getting something like that if I didn't have it. This holds the few switches. These are all custom I did recently. You've got your interior light, you've got fog light, CB, USB charger, which I'm going to be putting into a compressor soon, your exhaust gas temperature sensor switch, you can turn it on and off, and your exterior light there as well as the hazards, charger there. In between the seats and then above the two seats, I've got 3 speakers, one 6x9 sort of bassy speaker and 2 medium and tweeters at the top. Unfortunately, the 2 at the top aren't very good quality, about £10 for them both, and it's sort of blown now, so it's buzzing quite a bit, so I need to replace that. But seeing as it didn't have any speakers when I bought it, it's a lot better than it was. It's connected up to this Sony Bluetooth head unit here, and that works nicely as well. And at the front here, you've got Becca, the Hula Girl, and the little series one that my dad gave me. You see those in quite a few videos, and I don't think Boris would be the same without them. Good luck, really. And one of the things up here I did recently were these covers recommended to me by Sam and Lenny the Landy. These are Mud Stuff UK visor covers, and they have lots of mounting places for sunglasses, pens, bags, whatever you want. And up here I've got pen knife, charge cable, pens and mints and sunglasses and stuff like that, and they also cover up the really bright grey coloured old visors that were on here as well, which don't match with my nice new dark grey interior headlining. So all in all, there's been a few upgrades in here, a few changes, a few bits of welding and cleaning and adjustments, but all to make it a little bit nicer place to be. I absolutely cannot wait to get an Exmoor trim interior. Still undecided of exactly which steering wheel to go for and which seats, but I cannot wait to get that in and make a video about that. That'll be really nice. But it's been a bit of a journey trying to make this how I want it to be, and it's a much nicer place to be than when I first got it, so I'm really happy with how it's come along. So getting straight into the engine modifications and upgrades and maintenance and mechanics and fixing and holding back the oil and all the different bits and pieces that me and a few other people have done on it. Everyone knows that Land Rover engines aren't the most powerful things. Obviously, if you tweak them and you do different bits and pieces to them, the TD5s, you can get them remapped and they can go pretty quick. But this is a 300 TDI. It's got good torque to it, pretty good torque, good in low range for off-roading, very simple. No electronics, similar to the 200 TDI, and for me, I know I own one and this is the only one I've had, but it's the one that I'd really want the most. I think it's worked for me, 195,000 miles on the clock, and with a bit of maintenance here and there, it's going strong, hopefully for a long time. So what I've done to it, because of the sort of lack of power, I've done a few mods here and there to it, and that sort of helps along the way. But you can risk damaging your engine with these little bits and pieces, but I've got a way of making sure that I don't do that. So boost pin, very common, just a pin that goes into the fuel pump and is controlling the turbo boost as you apply fuel. And as you put your foot right down, you can feel the boost building up, and it helps you get up hills and different bits and pieces, and is quite a good, safe way of getting a bit more power. Very popular. Another thing is a boost ring. That's what I've done as well. That also goes on the fuel pump, a little bit lower down, a little bit hard to get to. You have to cut a Allen key to get to it, and it's a bit of a fiddly job. I really didn't enjoy that. That, I think, adjusts the timing of the fuel of each stroke of the engine and advance the timing ever so slightly, and you can put shims in to adjust that. You can take them out to add more power. I've not noticed a massive amount of difference, so maybe I'll start taking the shims out to try and increase the power. I've also played around with the screws on the fuel pump. That just allows a little bit more fuel in. I didn't want it too smoky, so I just did like maybe a quarter to a half of a turn. Some people turn it about 4 times, and it looks like a black cloud leaving the engine from the rear of the car. So when I got Boris, it had an EGR delete already, so I didn't have to do that. I have no idea how it passed its MOT. It must have been a bit of a dodgy one put in there, but one time I was underneath looking at something very simple, and I noticed that the exhaust was broken in 5 places, or had a hole in it. So I thought that's why it smells in the cabin and it sounds really loud, which is quite good. So I bought a new one on eBay for 90 quid, quite a cheap one, and I sprayed it with heat resistant paint to stop the rust a little bit, and it works really well. It's a little bit narrower than I'd want. I'd like a stainless steel 3-inch or something like that, be good, but it's a straight through, so you lost the cat there, and that's a bit more power there as well. So with all those little bits and pieces I've done to the engine, you have to be careful you don't start cooking it on hills. So you want to drive, you can drive quickly, but you don't want to be ragging it in the summer too much. But just to make sure you're not ragging it too much and it's not getting too hot to blow the head gasket or anything like that, I've installed an EGT sensor, exhaust gas temperature sensor, that just goes in where the blanking plate of the EGR is and runs into the cabin onto a little display which is on a switch, so I can turn it on and off, and that tells you the temperature of the exhaust gas, and there is a certain height of where you want to be going near, and it's about 600 or 700 degrees. Very simple one. When I got it, oil spilling down the whole block, so I just went and did the rocker cover gasket. Really good simple one to do. Just take the rocker cover off, give it a clean new gasket, very cheap. I also put some gasket sealant on, just smeared it over the gasket just to make sure it glues up really nicely, and I also replaced the rubber metal washers on top to hold it down really well. Water pump, important to do, was making a bit of noise. It's a big part of keeping the engine cool, so I replaced that pretty early on, and I'm pretty happy that the water's circling around pretty well in the engine, keeping it cool with all those other upgrades that I've done. Auxiliary belt looked pretty raggedy when I got it as well, a bit of an old one, and the noise I thought was coming from the water pump was actually the tensioner on there, and it really was seized up, so it wasn't keeping much tension at all. So I thought get a new one of those, a good one, and a new aux belt. Pretty easy to do. Some of the bolts are a bit rounded off, which I was a bit worried about, but now it grips it really well, and you know that there's not going to be any slipping there. A hazelnut actually went in through the grille and hit the radiator and got stuck between a piece of metal and the radiator, which was fine until a few 100 miles later it rubbed so much that it burst the radiator, so I had to replace that. And that came from Bearmac up in Wales. We actually drove to Bearmac when I was up there with a leaky radiator, and managed to get a new one of those, and that is really nice because you know that the intercooler and the radiator is replaced, and it's keeping the engine cool and the turbo air cool, and it's working really nicely. One day, came out here, didn't start, very fun, thought it was the starter motor, went to the local parts place, put one in, still nothing at all. Brilliant, couldn't believe it. Then I remembered I recently played around with the earth and forgot to do it up, which is a little bit silly. So the bolt was actually not done up, so the earth had just moved a bit. So crank that bolt down, Bob's your uncle, worked again. So recently went through the MOT, and there's quite a few things to check on there and a few things to replace that were definitely past its sell-by date. One of those was the front prop, so I opted with some advice to go with Gwyn Lewis, a very highly rated off-road upgrade and standard OEM parts replacement place in Wales. Really good guy. A lot of the things I mentioned in this video were neglected in its past, so when it came, you go around a corner and you hear that classic tick, 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 clicking sound as you go on full lock, and it's the swivel ball steering joint, the CV, clicking away because it's dry and you need to put one-shot grease in there, and unfortunately no one did that for a long time, so one of the balls had to be replaced because the chrome would come off and also everything along with it. Now it steers a lot better. I'm looking to do the other side because you should do both at the same time really. So the track rod ends, all the boots split on them. Josh, a friend of mine who does the MOT, noticed that, and they all needed to be replaced, so I went to Gwyn Lewis again with his recommendation. I'm glad I did, because then I upgraded to the heavy duty steering arms as well, recommended, because the old ones can bend if you take them off road, and these will last forever, and it's just a good company again. He put those in for me because I didn't really want to play around with the ball joints and splitting those, and he also noticed that the steering box was leaking quite a bit. Just got one of those second hand on eBay, chucked that in with the new steering arms, which thankfully he did, which is a really big job. And also, while we were there, recommended getting a Old Man Emu steering damper, which seems to help a lot with the ruts and different bits of off-roading, which is nice. So the clutch, that was a funny story. I was driving up to Wales to do Strata Florida with a few friends, Chris and Ellie, and on the way there from Devon, just a few miles from home, I started to not be able to change gear, which is always fun. So something was going on. So thankfully, with a bit of advice, I managed to double declutch it all the way there, and then we had a look at it, and it proved to be a weekend of toil and trouble. Thankfully, I had a great team of people helping me out, and some very understanding friends. So what we did, we replaced the clutch and clutch fork, release bearing, and master cylinder, slave cylinder, and welded up the chassis. That was when I replaced the radiator, the gear stick snapped, and the door stopped working, the door handle snapped, and that was a big mission. So we've got a heavy duty bare mat clutch in there now. And that worked for a little bit until it started slipping again, and unfortunately it was the setup on the master which was a little bit wrong, which was fixed, which is now working absolutely fine. So since then I've had a few other problems with the clutch. It's slipping a little bit, the pedal sticking, so I've opted to go for a whole new system. I've got a new pedal and pedal box. Even I refurbished my old one, the pivot was just gone in it, unfortunately. So a new genuine Land Rover pedal box assembly, and with that I've got a Loft Powermaster, and that's really good. You don't need the spring with that because it makes it so light already, about 30% lighter. It feels really nice with that, even lighter than my other car, just a standard car. And that paired up with a brand new TRW Slave just works really nicely. A lot of fluid gone through there to clear it all out, and it's all working perfectly again. One thing I would mention is that a lot of people don't really mention it online, is that the 300 TDI came with 2 different slaves for before and after a certain number of gearbox, and I put the wrong one on and it was slipping still. Couldn't work it out whatsoever. Looked it up, found out that there was a little forum somewhere where it said that there was actually 2 different slaves made for this gearbox, or the 300 TDI gearbox. Found a new one, very cheap, and chucked that on, and now it's working perfectly. So happy to have the internet for that one. Motorway miles in Defenders aren't fun already, so I opted to go for a slightly higher ratio transfer box from a Discovery 1 300 TDI, which had recently been refurbished. The old transfer box lever was a custom welded one, and unfortunately you couldn't get into all the gears with the length of the stick, so I was given a new assembly for the lever, and now you have the clearance for all the gears in low range and diff lock as well. Another part of the MOT was a service on the rear calipers. I maybe needed to get new ones, but what I needed to do was take them off, give them a clean up, give them a clean out, put new fluid through, a bit of a grease, new pads, and see how they went. And thankfully they are no longer unaligned, and they have equal power, and they pass the MOT and work really nicely. The fronts were thankfully not so bad, but the pads were worn even worse. So I gave them a bit of a clean, degrease, pushed the pistons back in, new pads again, and new fittings as well. All around had new fluid through, and the old stuff was pretty horrible. New bleed nipples all the way around from AP, and that just makes it a lot easier to bleed out and make sure that the fluid's really clean. And the brakes work perfectly now they're bedded in. One day I couldn't leave because the handbrake was stuck on, so I went underneath, took the prop off, and took the whole thing apart, gave it a bit of a clean out refurbish, made sure the pads are okay, they still look good. Make sure the shoes are okay, and they still look good, and I put a new cable in because it was all bunching up, and I think that was the main problem really. So new cable through, attached up to the handbrake, and now that's working a lot better. So the truck came with heavy duty springs in the back. I didn't know this for a long time, but I did notice that the Land Rover was sitting quite high at the back, and I didn't really like the look of it. And also, if you're trying to sleep in the back, all the blood drains to your head and it gives you a bit of a headache, which is not very nice. So I went to go and get some normal rated springs for the back so it rides more smoothly, and is also lower at the back, and I can tell you it's so much nicer going over bumps now. The old ones, when you weren't loaded, which I'm hardly ever loaded in the back, it would just kick you up your rear every time you went over a speed bump. So now it's much smoother and sits level and looks like a normal Defender again, which is good. All of the diff oils and gearbox oil, transfer box oil, when I got it, I must have not been touched for years. Someone really didn't care that much about replacing all that sort of thing, and even I sent it to a garage to have them replaced when I wasn't sure how to do it, and they said they replaced them. I looked later on and they hadn't. They were all still really gunky. They charged me for it, and we did them. The diff really did make a difference, because that gunk that was in there was limiting the speed and the roll speed of the whole car, and you don't want that to happen in a car this slow anyway, so it's working a lot better now. Front diff guard was given to me by Chris Powell, a friend of mine, and thankfully he doesn't have a Defender anymore, so he chucked it on underneath for me, and it's good to have a little diff guard there now to stop rocks from hitting that. One of the last things I did the other day was another service, oil, filters, and also renewing the sump seal as it was leaking so much. Just took that off, gave it a real good clean up with some degreaser, and used some RTV liquid sealant to seal it all back up. Left it for quite a few amount of hours to the next day, and filled it back up again, and it's looking a hell of a lot better. So in terms of that area, I think that's it. A few things done to it. Sounds like quite an easy job, but a lot of it takes quite a bit of time, as you know, and there's a lot of oil. It's all in the fun of it, rolling around on the floor, getting oily and dirty, and it makes it feel like it's much more yours and you're looking after it and keeping it running. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with where we've come with it, and I'm amazed it used to pass its MOT, but now it passes its MOT legally. Well, there you go. I told you it was going to be a long one. My mouth definitely is dry after all of that. I think the sun position's changed quite a lot as well. After all that, it might be hard to believe that there are future plans coming up, but the list does go on and there are upgrades to do. I will hopefully now be keeping track of all the things I do. I didn't really film much of this for YouTube. A lot of it went on Instagram, so if you're not following already, Boris the Defender on Instagram, and some of the footage you saw in this was for that. But from now on, hopefully, most of the upgrades I do will be coming up on YouTube as well, so do subscribe here as well. It's been a bit of a hard mission, a lot of learning curves for me, quite a bit of money spent unfortunately, but a lot of friends made in the process, great communities. All Terrain Collective I've joined now, and I'm really happy to be part of a great group of people. Some brilliant brands supporting me and Boris and the journey, and it's just been great to find out all these different UK made brands and lots of great people around the place, and I can't wait to get out to some shows to meet a lot of people that follow Boris and friends I've made through social media. I don't feel like I made the wrong decision. I maybe overlooked a few of the problems here and there, but I'm glad I stuck with Boris and I've done him up along the way and kept him going. So I guess from here it's all downhill. A new galvanised chassis and bulkhead is all I've got to do next. Be fun. Made a vet. So start. Ah! Ow! Hello. Poor me in the edit suite. Hey, fortunately it's a little bit of the wrong height for me, but... Another tractor! Yes!